Hey, everybody. Welcome to Talking Hockey Sense. My name is Chris Peters. It's episode 125 of the podcast. Yes, 125 episodes going back a few years, back before I was even at Flow Sports. And boy, am I glad I'm at Flow Sports. We got a lot of exciting things happening. The hockey season is right around the corner. And on today's show, we've got a lot to get to. It's been a few weeks since we've been on, so we got to catch up on that. Hope you guys enjoyed the Olympics and all the great coverage that the people at Flow brought you on Flow Track, Flow Wrestling. I mean, across the board, some really impressive work from our team. So hopefully you guys check that out. But we're going to get back to the hockey talk today, and there was a lot of big news. We're going to get into that first, and we'll talk about it just shortly here. But NCAA, CHL, it's on the horizon. We are going to talk about that in depth because you guys are going to have a lot of questions about that. And hopefully we can provide some answers today. And then on top of that, we also haven't been on since the World Junior Summer Showcase ended, haven't been on since the Hlinka-Gretzky Cup ended. We will talk about both of those events. And then also I have some questions to get to, a lot of them related to the World Junior Summer Showcase, which we were at for the entire thing. You can also check out a full projected roster breakdown on FloHockey's YouTube page. So just make sure you check out at FloHockey on YouTube to get a look at that projected roster so you can know what I'm talking about a little bit later. All right, so there is a lot to talk about today in terms of the CHL and the NCAA. That is what we are going to spend a good chunk of our time on because on the day that we record this, recording this on Tuesday, August 13th, it is the day after a suit was filed, a class action antitrust lawsuit in the District Court of Western New York, the U.S. District Court of Western New York on Monday. So what did it say? So basically, Ryland Masterson, who is a current junior hockey player in Ontario, has filed a suit against the NCAA, and then a number of schools were listed, including Canisius, Niagara, RIT, BC, BU, Denver, Quinnipiac, Notre Dame, Stonehill, and St. Thomas. You'll notice that each of the schools that reside in the Western New York area, those are part of this, and they are within the district that this suit was filed. So just in the effort of full disclosure, FloHockey, of course, is partners with Atlantic Hockey America, in which Canisius, Niagara, and RIT are involved. So we have their games on our air. But to get down to the nitty-gritty of what this means, basically, we knew this was going to happen. If you watched many episodes ago, we had Brad Schlossman on. We also had Mike McMahon on, two of the premier hockey insiders when it comes to college hockey. And we've been waiting for this suit. And basically what it's saying is, by denying CHL players the right to play, to not play in the NCAA, to ban them from playing in the NCAA, because even if in Ryland Masterson's case, they played 2 preseason games in the OHL and had forever sullied their eligibility, that is in violation of U.S. antitrust law, and particularly Section 1 of the Sherman Act. So this is a pretty big thing. Now, if you've been following the NCAA for any amount of time in the last, 3 years here, they have been getting sued all over the place in similar fashion, where there are certain rules that have been challenged. Amateurism has been challenged, NIL, all those different things that have come into play are largely the result of litigation. And this could be the next domino to fall. A lot of people had said, well, the coaches don't want this. They don't want, the NCAA coaches don't want this. And as Brad, myself, Mike had been saying for a long time, it doesn't matter what they want, because this is the thing that can change everything. A lawsuit that challenges the rules, essentially, of the NCAA to limit the CHL players. I did have a chance to look at the brief, and so I've seen the relevant chunks of this lawsuit, and there are compelling cases made on behalf of Ryland Masterson and really anyone that is barred from the NCAA because of this. And among those compelling arguments, it's the fact that the NCAA has specific rules for men's college hockey, where if you are, basically the CHL is designated as a professional league by the NCAA, whether you believe it is or it isn't. The NCAA, in its bylaws, says that that is a professional league under their definition. There were references to other situations, like the one involving Tom Melander from Boston University. He played in less than 5 minutes of game action over 2 games in Allsvenskan. He did have to sit out 2 games as a result of that at BU, but did not lose his eligibility. And here, in this case, Masterson played 2 preseason games, never played in the regular season game, and never played at the CHL level again. He's now lost it and can't get it back, as Tom Melander was able to. So that's another thing that is being challenged in this. So just to give you the actual wording, the lawsuit alleges that Masterson's lack of eligibility is the result of the illegal conspiracy in violation of the U.S. antitrust laws. It claims that a boycott of CHL players constitutes illegal horizontal agreement in restraint of trade and thus violates the Sherman Act. So basically, we have to also say this is a filed lawsuit. The NCAA and those schools have been served or are in the process of being served. Nothing has come to fruition. This has not been litigated. This has not gone to court. Nothing is decided. So in the short term, nothing really changes. In the long term, everything could change. And I'm not just talking about the NCAA allowing CHL players, and I'm talking about a systematic shift in the landscape of hockey at the amateur level. We're talking this ruling, whatever it ends up happening, will have a significant impact on the ecosystem that supports the NHL. Because make no mistake, these players have to go somewhere before they get to the NHL. CHL, NCAA are the 2 most proven paths for players to get to the NHL level. 30% of NHL players played in college hockey, around 50 in the CHL. And so, and about 60% are Canadian players, and then 30% or so are American players, and then you've got a lot of Europeans. So this does impact the game at a seismic level. Let's just put it that way. There are a number of interesting kind of situations that will continue to be brought up as part of this. But to put it more simply, odds are, in my opinion, this isn't fact, this isn't reported. In my opinion, the NCAA is going to lose this case. I think that there is a compelling enough case, and it's not just because of this argument the lawyers are making in this brief. It is also because of all of the other losses that have piled up on the NCAA, as they didn't really stand up to, constitutional muster, essentially, and have resulted in a dramatic shift in where things are going. There was also, we haven't been on the air since that ruling about the NCAA and scholarship limits and roster size limits and all those different things, and the fact there could be 26 scholarships across men's college hockey and women's college hockey on a single teams. That could be a whole other ball of wax. So this is happening in Congress with everything else that's happening, including this issue with the CHL player eligibility. So go back and, listen to the episodes that I talked with Brad Schlossman, Mike McMahon about this and about what we think will happen. I know Brad and I have had disagreements on what we think will actually be the benefit of this or not of this. But the NHL did talk at a recent general managers meeting or board of governors meeting that this was something that they were going to have to prepare for. They were starting to brace for this. I don't think anybody realized how quickly it was going to come along, but it takes one person. And in this case, it was Rylan Masterson, who's from Fort Erie, Ontario. He's currently playing junior A hockey in Canada, and really he's looking for that option. And someone was always going to be first. I had somebody in my mentions say, hey, this is just somebody complaining about the opportunity that they didn't get. Well, I think the other thing is that the rule kind of stinks. The fact that you at 16 years old have to make a decision about your eligibility, and you're a young guy, you're from Ontario, you were given an opportunity to play in a preseason game in the CHL, and maybe at that time you didn't even realize that by doing that you would never be eligible to play college hockey. But I don't think that should be something that eliminates a player's eligibility, especially because these aren't games that are, necessarily recorded beyond, what exists in media. So I think that that's another thing is that, kind of a bad rule is going to potentially create significant change in the landscape of college hockey, because it was only going to take one person to say that, hey, this is wrong and we're going to challenge it. So you've got that. There's also a couple of other instances. I mentioned the Tom Olander instance. There's also Yves Gascon, who played for in the QMJHL for Cape Breton, I believe, played in an actual QMJHL game. She did not lose her eligibility to play women's college hockey, and that is because the rules do not include women's college hockey. So if you're a women's player that plays in the CHL, let's say, that happens again, you don't lose your eligibility. You can go play NCAA hockey, even though you played in what the NCAA terms, at least for men's hockey, as a professional league. So there's a lot of inconsistencies in the ruling, which is, again, why I think it's going to have a hard time standing to muster. I don't think that this is going to be. So what I'm trying to tell you is get ready, because this is probably going to happen. And depending on how long this takes to get sorted out in courts, could happen in the near future. And that all of a sudden the NCAA doors are open to CHL players. It widens the player pool available to them. There are going to be other leagues that feel the pain from this ruling, because the system as it's set up now has given you kind of these buckets to pull from, these players, and you will get those players. And you can, certainly the NCAA and the CHL are fighting over the same elite players. But I think you're going to start to see a few things that are going to change. I mean, there are things that won't change and there are things that will change. What won't change is that playing college hockey will still afford you the opportunity to play against older, stronger competition. It'll be a condensed schedule, which allows more time for off-ice training, strength and conditioning. It also offers a bit more of an independent kind of environment where you're on your own, whereas the junior system, more it's billet families and things of that nature. Whereas college is a little bit more, kind of, you have the college experience like a regular college student and all that stuff. So there are going to be players that are going to pick those routes based on that. The CHL will continue to have, its ability to develop players as it has routinely for the NHL for decades and decades and decades. And some players may say, I would prefer to play on that side as opposed to, say, playing in a junior league, either like the USHL or the BCHL or one of those. So that's another area. So the decisions are still going to exist in that way. I think that the way that they develop their players isn't going to change. But what will change is I think that you will obviously see a deeper player pool that comes to the NCAA, but it will be older, even older than it is now. And you might see fewer players choosing to go on what would right now be the college-friendly path, going, to a junior A league, which is currently eligible, in order to play for another team. So I think that that's another thing that you have to kind of gauge. This is going to be a very challenging thing to sort through once it all gets there. The other thing that we've heard the NHL kind of talk about and others around the NHL talk about is what kind of rules would be created, different things that, like, if a player plays until he's 19 and in the CHL, then he can go to college. I just don't think that's going to work either. I think that you're also going to open yourself up to more antitrust situations where you're not allowing players the freedom of movement and not allowing for, the freedom of competition among rivals, for their players' services and things like that. So that's another thing that I think will complicate the whole process. But as we said, the lack of control that anyone really in the NCAA is going to have over this, and the fact that this is going to potentially really change things for coaches and will increase the recruiting, where you're not just recruiting against other colleges, you're also recruiting against the CHL for the same players. You're recruiting against the NHL to a certain extent because they're probably wanting to sign those players. And if they sign NHL contracts, how are they going to be able to play in the NCAA? Although with the way things are going, who's to say that you can't play in the NCAA with an NHL contract in the near future? I mean, amateurism is currently being redefined anyway. So this is finally coming to hockey, and it is going to have to be dealt with in a swift manner, and it is not going to be fun. It is going to make changes. And the thing is that my hope is that whatever happens, then players still are able to do what's in the best interest of of themselves, of their development, of what they want to accomplish. Then that's only a good thing. A player having more choices of where they will play is a good thing. I think that is something. I do think that the quality of certain leagues will suffer. I do think that the status quo is not going to continue. And as a result, we are going to have to adjust to a new normal. And that is really unclear what that's going to be at this time. But I am very fascinated to see what will happen with this. Does this also open the door for more European players that were under professional contract to come over and play in college hockey or in major junior? There are so many different things that are still going to impact the way this is decided. There's also international transfer rules, and I mean, it's a whole mess. But the fact of the matter is, the ball is now rolling on this. So get ready, because it has a chance to change everything that we know about the developmental system and the developmental ladder of the NHL. And how it's actually going to work is anybody's guess, because the changes could be so widespread. So get ready. It's coming. You're going to have to deal with it. We're all going to have to deal with it. But in the end, hopefully it works out for the best for the players. But this is something we will continue to follow extremely closely. This is something that will obviously have a very significant impact on what I do as a prospects writer, on everything that we look at and how this will change that. It's all stuff we'll be talking about, thinking about. But again, it's important to note, in the short term, nothing is going to change. But the short term isn't going to be much longer, given the way that things have gone litigation-wise for the NCAA. So get ready for some real crazy, new, and strange things that will be happening in the NCAA, in the CHL. We're all going to be on the sidelines just waiting to see how it plays out. But as we've seen, college sports has changed forever, and there's no going back. So here it is. So get ready. All right. So that's the big news of the day. Now we got to catch up, because we've been busy. And, last week we had the Hlinka-Gretzky Cup. I did not go this year, but, was following from afar. Also was at the World Junior Summer Showcase and was able to do more with that. So let's talk a little bit about the Hlinka-Gretzky Cup, because that obviously, if you are a fan of the NHL draft, if you are a fan of prospects, you know that this is basically one of the big events to kick off the draft season. There is a lot of debate about the value that you should put on the tournament in terms of the quality, the fact that it is in summer, the fact that these players aren't in midseason form, what kind of mistakes or assumptions can be made off of players that played in this, basically week-long summer hockey tournament. But in the end, it is an opportunity to see high-end draft players playing in a high-stakes environment in front of a lot of NHL scouts. I mean, there's that number's in the multiple hundreds of NHL personnel that go to this event every year. So if you didn't know, Canada did win. They won their 25th Hlinka-Gretzky Cup. So that is, I think is something like 37 years or something like that. So they do a lot of winning at this summer hockey tournament. I did keep seeing the words best on best used for this tournament. Which again, not really. I know it's good for marketing, but it's not true. So, you have that, USA doesn't have their NTDP players. Sweden was missing some of their top players, including Anton Frundell, due to injury, which can happen to anybody. And the other thing that I did want to bring up about this is, again, like in tournaments like this one in particular, it's where you feel that absence of Russia. Now, again, I'm not advocating for Russia to come back to international hockey, because let's face it, it's their reasons they're not there are not because of hockey. And they're much bigger than hockey and more important than hockey. In the end, though, we have seen a lot of craziness at the Hlinka-Gretzky Cup and at the under-18 Worlds for that matter, and at the World Junior Championship for that matter, in the absence of Russia. One fewer team that is especially competitive with the top dogs like Sweden, Finland, USA, Canada, it makes for a lot of crazy things. So we've seen record numbers across these tournaments in the last couple of years where players have had exceptional. We saw James Higgins break the single tournament under 18 scoring record last year. Adam Banach became the all-time scoring leader in Hlinka-Gretzky Cup history. Now he's one of the few guys that have played at it twice, and he has 21 points over 10 games. But again, 21 points in 10 games. But again, you take some of these with a grain of salt and you say, why are all these records breaking? Well, the tournaments have gotten less competitive. And we saw that, frankly, at this last tournament. I mean, we had a couple of players that had 7 points against Switzerland, so it's just kind of the way that it works and the way that it runs. But the Hlinka-Gretzky Cup did end with Canada winning, as I mentioned. They beat Czech for the second straight year. And again, it was a close game. And I don't know what Czech is doing to be really good at summer hockey, but they have really ramped it up these last couple of years and gave Canada a run for their money in the championship game. And I mentioned Adam Banach. He was one of the top scorers in the tournament, had 11 points this year. But Canada was just too good. Jack Ivankovic, their goaltender, allowed just 3 goals over 4 games in the entire tournament. You had Matthew Schaefer, the captain, score 6 points in the tournament. Most among defensemen, real breakout performer for them. And I again, a guy that I think will very likely be the number 1 defenseman drafted and very well could be drafted very high in this upcoming draft. Matthew Lansing had a really nice goal scoring effort for Team USA, which ended up placing 4th in the tournament. We saw a number of Swedish players have really productive tournaments. We also saw Jacob East Wozniak, who did not play a big role at the under-18 Worlds, but was on the team as an underager, came in, and he was the top goal scorer or a top goal scorer for Sweden at this event and scored some big goals himself. And then, as I mentioned, Adam Banach, who you will be able to see on FloHockey all next season, as he will be a member of the Youngstown Phantoms in the USHL. He does have the all-time scoring record previously held by Magnus Päijärvi Svensson, or Svensson Päijärvi, at 15 points over 8 games, 21 points in 10 games for Adam Banach, the undersized dynamo who will be coming to the USHL. Another guy to note in terms of breakout performances, Radim Mrtka got a lot of buzz coming out of the gold medal game. He barely came off the ice for the Czechs. He's a big man. He played big minutes. I think he's got a lot of raw potential. I liked him in previous viewings that I had of him as well. So that's a guy to certainly keep an eye out for. Ivar Stenberg, who's Otto Stenberg's younger brother, had a very nice tournament as well. So, there are a lot of players to keep an eye on throughout the rest of the season. But what is the Hlinka ultimately? It's not necessarily an end-all, be-all evaluation event. It is a chance to build a baseline. And for these players, some guys put their names on the map. Other guys at least said, hey, you're going to have to watch me a lot more this year. But it was another Hlinka-Gretzky Cup that has come and gone. Canada wins again. Gavin McKenna, who did play in the tournament, was fine. Didn't have an amazing tournament. Like, he lit up the Under-18 World Championship. Didn't really do that at the Hlinka-Gretzky Cup. So I heard some people saying, hey, well, he wasn't that effective. And especially given the quality of the competition, I think there was an expectation that he was going to outright dominate and maybe score 21 points himself over 5 games, but that did not happen. So 6 points for Gavin McKenna, who still remains one of the exceptional talents for the 2026 NHL draft. So really excited to get the draft season underway. We are going to have coverage for you all season long on FloHockey. As we build up to the 2025 NHL draft, we'll have on-site coverage from the USHL Fall Classic. We'll obviously have the USHL entire season. You also have the BCHL, the CJHL, and all of its member leagues. You have all of the different things that come into a draft season. And we'll also have a number of college games and other things that you'll be able to watch, and a lot of big things on the horizon too. We're going to have plenty to talk about in the next couple of weeks. We're going to go on a little bit of a hiatus here, but we're going to come back and we are going to be right in the thick of it. So the draft season is just about underway. So make sure you stay tuned to FloHockey and across our social media channels as we cover the NHL draft extensively in a number of different formats, and certainly we'll have some preseason NHL draft rankings coming your way in the not so distant future. So make sure you stay tuned for that. All right. Now we're going to move on into our listener Q&A. And I called for questions last week, forgot that I wasn't going to be recording, held on to those questions, and we're going to focus these on the World Junior Summer Showcase because I haven't been talking to you since I got back from that. And we got to see a lot of things. As I mentioned earlier, we did have a projected U.S. roster that I published on FloHockey.tv. You can also watch the video on FloHockey or on our YouTube channel, where I give a little bit of a breakdown of what I think Team USA is going to look like. But, I think that there is going to be a lot of excitement about the U.S. entry. Canada's team will be very good and will have a lot of exciting young talent on it. I think the Swedes will have a challenging team, but maybe not necessarily as good as last year's team. Finland will be interesting, as they always are. And then you look at the Czechs and the Slovaks. They've really been coming on in some of these younger tournaments, especially Czech, and they're going to have some guys with World Junior experience coming back next year. So it should be a very exciting tournament. But it's summer. We're going to talk about what we saw in Plymouth. So we're going to get down to it. And this is also an NHL draft question. So let's get to it with Charlie. And Charlie here asks, how did Logan Hensler look at the World Junior Summer Showcase? All right, so Logan Hensler is one of the top defensemen available for the 2025 NHL draft at this time. He's going to Wisconsin. He played, there were a lot of defensemen in camp, and I mentioned that in my story. There were just so many defensemen. It was hard for some guys to stand out. And I felt like at times that was the case for Logan Hensler. They did give him a few looks on the power play. They gave him some opportunities to get a little bit of run with the puck. But I did think that there was evidence there that he's on the bubble for this roster, I think. And I wouldn't say it's a very strong position on the bubble at this time. We'll see how the first half of the year goes, how he handles his first year of college hockey. But Hensler has size. He has skating ability. He does have some offensive skill. He's got the ability to make some plays. I think that, defensively, there were some miscues, a couple of errant plays with puck and puck management issues. At times, the pace seemed to get to him, because I tell people this all the time. Players that have played, all year in the USHL, all year in college hockey, all year in the CHL, even some guys that played in the NHL, you get to that World Junior and the pace is just different. I mean, it's the NHL is as fast as anything there is, but you get to that World Junior and there's just the pressure and the stakes and everything. And even in the summer camp, you get to see the separation. Players like Hensler, who are really brilliant skaters, stand out. But again, this ability to make decisions quickly enough. There have been some concerns that I have about his overall offensive hockey sense that has prevented me from listing him as a top 10 prospect for this draft. And I'm not certain that we have a bona fide, first rounder at this stage. I think he can grow into it. I think he has first round upside all day. I think the athlete is there. I think that there's enough hockey sense and there's going to be some skill, but he's never going to put up the sexy numbers, and not in college, certainly not in his first year, and not at with the style that Wisconsin is going to play next year. And so how does that factor in, and what will he ultimately look like? So I think it's going to be an interesting year for him. I think he's going to have a hard time making Team USA's roster, but I did have him in the mix as an extra on that roster. So keep an eye on that one. But I like the player an awful lot. I think there's a lot more to get to, and we'll see ultimately where he ends up. All right. Our next question comes from CM. And I don't believe this is CM Punk, even though he is a Blackhawks fan. Oliver Moore, a guarantee for this World Junior Championship? CM, yes, he is. No doubt in my mind, Oliver Moore will be part of Team USA's roster, barring some absolutely atrocious first half, which I don't anticipate he'll have at the University of Minnesota. I think Team USA is going to use him in a variety of ways. He's got the inside track of being the number 2 center for the U.S., especially if Will Smith is not going to be part of the team. And it's not 100% that he won't be, but it's likely he won't be. So then you've got him, but you've got Oliver Moore as kind of your energetic, fast second line center, can play tough matchups, will kill penalties, will be on your second power play. I think that he'll play a significant role. The thing that stands out to me is that I think Oliver Moore is getting faster. He's getting stronger. He's getting better. The biggest thing that he's going to need to continue to work on is just getting those hands to catch up to his feet. A lot of bobbled pucks, a lot of misplays, and as he smooths that out If he does smooth that out, we're talking about a player with some massive potential. Because there are a few players in the world, not just in the NHL, not in the world, that skate as fast as he does from a standstill. It's just incredible to watch. And I think that his explosiveness and his ability to create, and hopefully just finish plays a little bit better, that'll give him a chance to have a huge role for Team USA after being a bit of a Swiss Army knife last year, playing all over their lineup and helping them in a significant way in a few of those games. All right, our next question comes from Cameron, and Cameron asks, thoughts on Strathman and Whitelaw from my Blue Jackets? I know both are on the bubble, but Whitelaw has power play potential, and Strathman I thought was a good puck mover and catalyst, except for maybe his last game at the Showcase. What are your thoughts? Well, I think they're both on the bubble. Neither of them were on my projected roster. William Whitelaw is headed to the University of Michigan this year. I think he's going to have an opportunity to put up some big numbers. I think he'll have a chance to impress coaches, so he could certainly stay in the mix that way. I don't think he ever really found a role. They did have him on the power play, but he never really got a look with the big guns, and he's skilled and he's got the ability to make plays. I think there's some consistency issues. There's every once in a while, there's a little bit of an effort that wanes. When he's playing and with his aggressive attitude and plays a little more physical, he has that capability to play kind of on the edge even. There were times where he went a little over the edge and it wasn't necessarily helpful. So some situational awareness will be important there. I just think that the forward group that they are going to have, there's a lot of defined roles. And William Whitelaw, to me, if he's not in their top 9, I don't know where he goes. And I couldn't find a spot for him in that top 9. I don't think he's a player that you want to bring as an extra or as a 13th forward. I think that doesn't necessarily benefit you. I think you could find more versatile players that could play in that role. So that's why I didn't have him on the roster. As for Strathman, I didn't think he had a great camp in general. I thought that his puck moving was not very good, even though I think that it's something he can do well. I think the pace was just too much for him defensively as well. He got walked a couple of times. So it wasn't a good camp. That doesn't mean that he's off the team. Basically, I thought that Cole Hudson locked up the second power play. I thought that, with Zeev Buyam as your number one defenseman, if Strathman's not going to be on your power play, is he good enough at 5-on-5 to be part of your roster? And quite frankly, I didn't think so. I think that he's going to have to take some lumps in the college game for a little bit, but I think he'll be a very good college player. I think his pro prospects are fine. But again, the World Juniors is more about not what have you done, not what are you going to do as a prospect. It's what can you do right now. And I just didn't feel, based on what I saw from the other defensemen, that Andrew Strathman was bringing what they're going to need. So again, 2 fine players, but again, when you're talking about the World Junior Championship level, that's a different level to get to, and you have to get to it quicker than maybe your upside would allow. All right. Our next question comes from Maxime, and Maxime asks, what are your thoughts on Otto? Does he have a chance to crack Finland's roster next December at the World Junior Championship? All right, so Maxime asking about the Atus Koivu, who of course was selected by the Montreal Canadiens. He played, that's where his father played, and also where he grew up you think he grew up primarily in Anaheim because his dad was a little further in his career. But either way, Atos Koivu is going to get a lot of attention as a Montreal Canadiens pick. And I think that the Habs wouldn't have picked him if they didn't think he could handle it. And I think what you get with Atos Koivu, a very mature, very smart, very aggressive, quick hockey player, a guy that probably, if he's going to make Finland's roster, it's as a third line center. Maybe as a fourth line guy, as a penalty killer. I think he has enough quickness and aggressiveness to be effective in that role. I think he can play within the team concept very well. There's enough skill that they put him on the power play. I just think that, Finland is going to have a tough roster to build. They have some real good players, but it's just who's going to be available. Consta Helenius likely coming to North America. Will he be released to go play at the World Juniors from the AHL? Players like that. Emil Hemming, so if he's going to make the roster, it's going to be in a bit role. He's 2 years of World Junior eligibility as well. So if he doesn't end up making it, he'll still have a chance to do it again. But I mean, last year was a season of tremendous growth for Atos Koivu. He was not on the radar to be part of their national team program, and certainly not on the radar to be part of their World Junior program this soon. But he worked his way in there. He played pro games in Finland. He shined when he had opportunities with the national team, and it earned him an opportunity to make this roster. So I don't think he's a lock, but I think he certainly has an opportunity to make the team. So thank you for that question, Maxime. All right, Trevor asks, we got a Canadian player now. Trevor is going to ask us about what impression did you get from Matthew Wood's play? Still not sure how to judge that pick from Nashville's perspective yet. All right, well, Matthew Wood was released from camp before the Canada came to Plymouth, and that's not because he didn't make the team. It's because they sent all the guys that were on last year's roster home. So I didn't even get to see Matthew Wood in this environment. Would have liked to have seen it because I wanted to see, has he made some adjustments to his pace? How is he playing with speed? This is going to be a very critical year for Matthew Wood. He decided to transfer from UConn to Minnesota. So he's now going to play in a program that's going to have a few more weapons around him, a few more guys that can get him the puck. And I think that will ultimately help him, get more of that game going. I think the Big Ten style is going to challenge him to a certain extent because I think pace of play has always been the issue with Matthew Wood. The skating is a concern. If he has size, he has scoring ability though. So I think, he'll probably be part of Canada's roster. I don't see any reason why he wouldn't be. I think he brings too much to the table. So, but in terms of judging him as a prospect, I mean, there's still time. It wasn't an amazing draft +1 season for him. He did make Canada's World Junior team. He did show some glimpses of the skill that I think he can bring to the NHL. I think he's an incredibly smart hockey player as well. It's just the pace of play is not amazing for him. So it's something that we'll definitely have to see. And I think both USA and Canada sent their returnees home early. They already know those guys. What more do you need to know? And so I think that was ultimately what happened there. All right. Our next question comes from Dan. And Dan asks, how would you compare and contrast Cole Hutson with his brother Lane? Well, they're always going to be compared. They're same size. They play the same position. There's a lot of similarities feature-wise. What are the differences between the two? So how they compare first, I will say that Cole and Lane are both obviously very skilled. They have tremendous vision, really great hockey sense in the offensive zone. Both do an especially good job of walking down into the offensive zone and creating scoring chances at the middle of the net and then being able to recover to get back. I think that's something that's part of both of their games. I would say that Cole probably has the better shot between the two players, at least at the same age. And it has more of a goal scorer's sense, I feel like. But Lane is by far the more dynamic player with his hands and his feet. Cole is a great skater too, really good on his edges, deceptive footwork, is able to escape pressure very easily, and makes a lot of plays. But I think that's to me, the separating factor is I think Cole's ability or Lane's ability to process the game, the ability to make the plays that he can, the stick handling ability that he has, the touch on the puck that he has. It's just really unrivaled among defensemen. It's special. And I think that's a separating factor between him and Cole. Cole, I think, has a little bit more. They're both massively competitive players and probably don't get enough credit for that because of their size. So it doesn't show up. They don't plant guys typically. But I think Cole has a little bit more of that, like would stab you if he had to get the puck, that kind of thing. I would not recommend that. I think there's laws against that. So don't do that, Cole. But I think he would if it were allowed. All right, let's move on to our next one. And this is another U.S. prospect. And this comes from a real standout in camp. And this question is from Mike. Mike asks, Brody Zemer as a prospect, what's his upside, a comparable? Can he make the U20 World Juniors? Does he have a chance at an NHL career? And what does he need to work on? Well, Mike, it's obviously very early in Brody Zemer's young career, just drafted last year. I love that he got drafted by Buffalo. I think it's going to be a good spot for him. I think that he is going to continue to develop. And yes, I do think there's NHL upside. But the question is, I think what a lot of people would say is, okay, well, is he really amazing at any one thing? And I would say that he's probably not. He's got a great work ethic, great character guy, a guy that's been a captain. He's got just a tremendous work ethic. And then he does have, I think, underrated skill and the ability to finish. And he was really one of the standouts in camp. He had multiple goals in camp. A lot of it came off of effort down low, popping out to the front, getting a shot away. Really impressive that he's able to do that. I think Brody Zemer is a guy that is going to thrive at Minnesota. The question is in terms of upside. Like, I think if he's going to make it at the NHL level, it's going to be in a depth role. He's not going to be skilled enough to be a high-end scorer for your team. He's not a top six guy. He's probably going to play matchups. He's going to provide some scoring depth. And it's because of that motor and that energy. He's not like an amazingly fast skater. He's not an amazingly big guy. He's just very average in a lot of different things, but just does so many things at a high enough level where it allows him to impact the game. I think it'll do that in college. It'll be a test for him to see if he can do it as a pro. And depending on how much stronger he gets at University of Minnesota, how much opportunity he has to do different things, I think, there's a lot to look forward to in Brody Zemer. But I think in terms of overall upside and things like that, I think it's limited. Guys like that play like him have a harder time reaching the NHL. Just because there isn't that one thing that you can point to. So it will have to be that work ethic. It will have to be the defensive play and the ability to, be aggressive on the forecheck and do those things. And I think that's a reason why he's got a chance to make Team USA. He was on my projected roster. I think his camp put him on the map, and now he can do that, stay on the map with a really good second half, or first half, rather. We're not even in the start of the season, so how could it be second half? All right. Our next one comes from Avco Cup, frequent questioner. The World Juniors was always referred to as a 19-year-olds tournament, especially for Canada. It does seem that recently more and more 18-year-olds or even younger players are making it and playing significant roles. Which 18-year-old players do you think Canada will bring this year? Boy, what a tough question that is to answer, because in camp there were a lot of really good 18-year-olds. I think that Canada is going to go with a more senior team if they have the choice. I do think that they still believe that having more 19-year-olds is a difference maker. And you think about it, it's just another year of development for those players. There should be some separation between them and the 18-year-olds. Not a lot. And as we've seen in recent years, especially with Team USA last year, they took 11 guys that were eligible to return the following year and won. And so, it's about talent. It just comes down to talent. And I think when you say it's a 19-year-olds tournament, it's because your 18-year-olds just don't have enough talent. And in this case, I think both the U.S. and Canada are going to have a number of 18-year-olds that they're going to have to consider. As for Canada, I think we'll see those on the blue line. I have a feeling, Sam Dickinson has a great chance to be there. Zane Parekh has a great chance to be there based on what we saw from them. I think that Beckett Seneca, Jet Luchenko, Tij Ginla, players like that are going to have to battle for spots, but I think that they're very much in the mix and have a real opportunity to play for Canada. So there's that as well. But yeah, I don't think that I think that they have enough of those 19-year-old guys that it depends on who makes the NHL too. You have to wait and see who's available, as is always the case with Team Canada. But I think that they're going to have some really good players. And the other thing that I'd say too about the 19-year-old tournament, you look at the way that hockey is going, and there are just so many more players that are achieving at younger levels that you just have to be able to identify that and not be blinded by we should be more experienced. We should have bigger players. We should have, 19-year-olds. We should have these, I think you have to take the best players, and more often anymore, the younger players are making a great case that they could be not just good players, but among the best players. And that means, like if Gavin McKenna, who did not have a great Hlinka-Gretzky Cup, if he plays like that, he's going to have a harder time making Team Canada. But I think that's another guy that I would put on Team Canada. I put Porter Martone on Team Canada. I think that there's a lot of guys that could do it. So they have a really good class of 18-year-olds. They have guys that are draft eligible this year, guys that are draft eligible next year, and then a lot of guys that were drafted just in June. So a lot to look forward to for that team. All right. Our next one, it's another Canada question. This one comes from Brigstew86. I thought Chadwick was a surprise invite by Canada. How did he look in the final game against USA? You know what? Actually, I thought that Canada's blue line in general had looked pretty good. I mean, I think that they had a lot to like about them. And yeah, I agree. Noah Chadwick was a surprise ad for me as well. Late round pick, a guy that has size and everything, but I thought he did what he had to do. His mobility looked good enough. He was processing the game at the right pace. He defended well enough. It's just a matter of is well enough good enough for playing for Team Canada. I think he'd be on the outside looking in. But the thing that I'm always looking for in these camps is you can usually find guys that look out of place. Noah Chadwick did not look out of place. So the Toronto Maple Leafs draft pick certainly looked like, hey, I belong. There could be a spot for me. I thought that he had some good enough moments in that game. Not amazing, but good enough. So there we go. All right. We're moving a little bit off of the World Junior Summer Showcase for just a second here as we go to Alex. And Alex asks, and this is an interesting topic given where we're at. Any plans for the USHL to consider expansion? We've seen several higher-end Canadian-born players take the USHL NCAA development route and seems to be gaining steam with European players choosing that track. Alex, you're right. I mean, there is absolutely an uptick in Canadian players coming to play in the USHL. There's an uptick in European players coming to play in the USHL. And I think it's also, you look at a lot of the NHL teams that have drafted players, they've been more than comfortable to have their drafted players either stay in the USHL or come to the USHL from other places. And so that's good for the league. What we talked about at the top of this podcast is why I'm going to hesitate to answer the first part of your question, which is, consider to expand. I think the USHL, they're always exploring those opportunities. I mean, and I don't want to speak out of school here. I think that they're, if somebody comes forward with an idea, they're going to listen. There's always that. And I think that the player pool is starting to expand enough to where you can make more teams. I mean, there are so few players that enter the USHL anymore that don't leave with a Division I scholarship. Back in the day, that wasn't always the case. There was a little bit more of a split, but it just seems like if you make it to the USHL, you got a great chance to make it to college. So I think that expansion is always possible. I think everybody should probably stay in a holding pattern until we figure out what's going on with this new law. If there is going to be a new law, if this lawsuit goes through and it changes the dynamic of the landscape, then we got a lot of things that are going to have to be sorted out before we can start talking about expanding current junior leagues. What's to say anything could happen? Like, are there going to be mergers? Are there going to be, is the USHL, do they put themselves on that plane with the CHL as well? And then they're all competing for the same players. I mean, I think anything can happen at this point. And so I would have some concern about expanding and then having this seismic shift in the landscape of player development, and either your pool shrinks, somebody's pool is going to shrink, and you got to find a way to compete. And in some ways, expansion could be a way to compete because you want to keep more players closer to home and give more players opportunities to play at other locations. So very intriguing nonetheless. But Alex, yes, I think that it's always possible, but I think we're going to have to wait and see for just a little bit. All right, we got a couple more, and then we're going to get out of here for September, or until September. And I'll take my little sip of water so I can hopefully stop coughing on you. All right. Good question here from Clean Hits Hockey. We got some Utah hockey coverage coming from Clean Hits. Would love to see that. How much does the U18 and Hlinka success role play into U20 selection versus World Junior Summer Showcase camp performance? Like Cole Baudouin, huge role at the under 18s and a big part of success. Does that matter more than his recent World Junior Summer Showcase camp? I think it all matters. I mean, you can't weight it too much. The fact is, see, it took a sip of water, didn't even matter. The fact of the matter is, Cole Baudouin is He if he's to make Team Canada, it's as a depth role player. It's as a guy kind of in the role similar to what he played at the under-18 Worlds. The thing is that he proved he can play it. He was good at the World Junior Summer Showcase too. He plays a heavy game. He's physical. He's one of the stronger players that came into the draft last year. He closes quickly. He's a very solid two-way hockey player. Has a good shot, can do things. I just don't think the offense will be what he's needed for. Both things matter. How did he perform in the game against USA? He was competitive. How did he play at the under-18 Worlds? I really do think that a lot of times the most important thing is how you're playing in the moment. They want to take players that are going. They want to take players that are already on a bit of a heater, where they're warmed up, where they're having success. Doesn't mean that they're taking the guy with the most points, but they're taking the guy that's most in his game in that moment. So I do think that the closer you get to the selection process, the more important the individual scouting is at the in October and November, as opposed to what happened in the summer. But summer is your opportunity to leave a lasting impression on the staff. It's the only time you guys are all together. It's the only time they're all together talking about it face to face. It's your best opportunity to leave a lasting impression. I feel like Cole Beaudoin did that, and that will matter as much as what he did at the under-18 Worlds, and probably not as much as what he's doing in the first half of the season. All right, our final question here comes from Andrew, and we are going to tickle the itch here of the Philadelphia Flyers fans. I know, tickle the itch. That is not a figure of speech. I just want to go on record as saying that. That's not something I say normally. So you're welcome, podcast audience. That's a first. All right. So anyway, we get to Andrew's question here. I know the sample size was small, but did you see tangible improvements in Jet Luchenko's game from last season to now? Also, what would he have to do in your mind to justify taking him instead of Bouillon? Well, of course, this will always be kind of part of the debate. Should Philly have drafted Zeev Bouillon, or should they have gone with what is perceived as a reach to take Jet Luchenko? What I'll say about Jet Luchenko's performance at the World Junior Summer Showcase, I'm not going to extrapolate it and saying he played better than he did at the regular season, because he played really well all of last year. He was awesome at the World Under-18 Championship, and I'm in more of a defensive two-way role. And at the World Junior Summer Showcase, he was one of the more impactful players on the ice in both games I saw, because his speed is a weapon. He is, I think he's a really good player. I think he's got a great chance to make Team Canada. I thought he outplayed some of his fellow draft prospects in that camp, where his skating was an issue, it was a positive thing that he was able to use to his advantage. He was strong. He was hard on pucks. He was doing all those different things. And I really liked what I saw overall from Jet Luchenko. What he has to do to justify him taking over Zeev Bouillon, I mean, this is going to be a story that plays out over years now. And really the thing that he's going to have to do is to continue to push the offensive game, to create more, be a driver on top of being such a tremendous skater. I think he can do that. I think he's shown evidence of that before. I think the two-way play is going to be there as well. Continuing to get stronger, more explosive. I mean, the fact of the matter is Jet Luchenko was one of the youngest players eligible for the entire draft last year. He's got room to grow. He's got time. He's got a lot of things on his side right now where he's going to be able to move it. Now, if you go back right now, if you ask me right now, between the two players who I would prefer, I would take Zeev Bouillon. I think the 50-point defenseman out of college hockey, a guy with tremendous skating ability, a guy who really improved his defensive game and became a true two-way defenseman, and is really growing into his body and becoming stronger. I would take Zeev Bouillon. I just think the upside is higher. But Jet Luchenko, the story is still far from being written about him. So I've got a lot of time for him. I'm really excited to see where he's going to go. And I think he's got a chance to make this Canadian roster, which would be a great thing for a player that, obviously that was a pick that got a lot of attention. So, and I was critical of it too. But at the same time, I really like Jet Luchenko as a player, and I think he plays winning hockey, and that's what Canada's going to need in Ottawa. So I think that puts him firmly on the radar to be part of that team. So we'll be really excited. Stay tuned all the rest of this year until the World Juniors are over, because we will be covering it wall to wall right here on FloHockey. We will be in Ottawa. We will be at camps. We will be ready, and we'll be providing you up-to-date information. But that is the chapter closing on the World Junior Summer Showcase, and now the first half of the season, the important evaluation point for all those players. So make sure you are staying tuned to FloHockey to watch their progression. All right, so we're going to take a break here for a few weeks. We are going to be back in a few. There might be some changes. There might be some things that we're working on behind the scenes here that hopefully we'll be able to talk about in the very near future. But for now, we're going to take our little break. We're going to end summer. We're going to let you guys relax. We're going to let you catch your breath. We'll still have content for you on FloHockey.tv. We'll still have content for you on our YouTube page. We'll still have it across our social media channels, so make sure you're following at FloHockey. But we've got so much more to get ready for that we need to take some time away from the podcast because there is going to be a lot of new stuff coming this year on FloHockey content-wise. Really cannot wait to share with you all of that new stuff. We're going to have our draft rankings as usual. We're going to have college hockey coverage. We're going to have junior hockey coverage, pro hockey coverage. We're going to have it all and really cannot wait to show you what we've been working on this summer. So we need to take a few more weeks off to get that going, and then we'll be back. So in the meantime, make sure you have subscribed to this podcast, download it, share it with your friends. If you are the reviewing type, leave us a 5-star review or a 5-star rating and also a written review on Apple Podcasts. Certainly helps us a lot to get the word out about the podcast. And then on top of that, make sure you are following each and every episode either on the Flow Sports app or on FloHockey.tv or on our YouTube page. Lots of different ways to interact with this podcast. But we're going to take a little bit of a rest, and then we will be back soon to talk much more hockey. We're going to have so much more for you here in the next couple of weeks. Want to give a huge shout out and thanks to Josh for producing today's episode. Want to thank all of you that asked questions this week, and certainly every single one of you for listening. It has been such a pleasure as we kind of wrap up the summer and get ready for hockey season. It's almost here, folks. Can't wait. So that is going to do it for this week's episode of Talking Hockey Sense. My name is Chris Peters. We'll catch you next time.